Now we get to meet Isaiah, one of the most prolific prophets, or if not the most popular prophets in the Bible. So Isaiah was a prophet who delivered God's message to the people of Judah during the reigns of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. He was also the advisor and the prophetic unction over these kings, and his ministry lasted for 40 years. In the first part of this book, the book of Isaiah, that's from chapters 1 to 39, Isaiah is using what has happened in Israel to warn Judah about what will happen to them in future. In chapters 40 to 55, he prophesies about the coming Messiah 700 years in advance. In chapters 56 to 66, he prophesies about the final judgment and restoration, our future, and what we await from God, and how God will establish the new heaven and the new earth. So keep that in mind as we read these books. The book of Isaiah is the most quoted book in the New Testament. Fun fact. Now let's start. In chapter 1, Isaiah calls out the people of Judah for forsaking God. He painted a picture of a people weighted down by their sin, so sick but still refusing to turn to God for healing. He compared their level of sin to Sodom and Gomorrah, that ancient town that was destroyed in the time of Lot for just being so sinful. In 11 to 15, we see that God had rejected the sacrifice of the people, calling them futile and worthless. It was almost as though he was changing his mind about the sacrifices that he had so painstakingly given to Moses, to describe to Moses, to give to the people to observe. But the truth was, the people weren't living by the moral and ethical demands of their covenant relationship with him. So the sacrifices were now like empty religion. They were practicing religion as opposed to practicing worshiping God with an obedient heart. Their hearts were far from him, and he knew it because they were just practicing meaningless rituals. They failed him by being unfaithful and causing the defenseless, the orphan, and the widows to suffer, which were against God's express commands. In chapter 2, Isaiah spoke about the day of the Lord in the context of the messianic age, when there will be peace and all the 8 nations will come to Zion. It will hold terror for the disobedience, but victory for God's people as their enemies are judged during that day. In chapter 3 mainly addresses the arrogant women of Jerusalem. Now, this could have been the women directly, as some theologians believe, but then others believe it is a metaphor for Jerusalem itself as a woman. And according to Isaiah, they played a role in the ethical and moral collapse of Judah, and God condemned them for their vanity, immodesty, pride, and shameful behavior. Part of their judgment included the fact that much of the male population of Jerusalem will die in battle. Chapter 4 speaks of hope for the renewal of Zion as Isaiah paints a hopeful picture. And here we hear about the branch of the Lord. And the branch of the Lord here refers to the Messiah. The righteous remnant, that's those who survive judgment, are also mentioned. The holy remnant would experience God's forgiveness and protection. Jesus in John 15:1 said, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser." This reference is made to him, Jesus, as the branch of the Lord. So that's the connection that you make. And watch out for things in Isaiah, because Isaiah was one of the prophets that made a lot of messianic prophecies. So things that were linked to Jesus, which is why, obviously, is one of the most quoted scriptures or most quoted books in the New Testament. Now, here's my hashtag getting to know God lesson. God is our dwelling place and our place of refuge. God is with us all the time. His Spirit dwells in us. So we must know that genuine security does not come from our government, does not come from politics, it doesn't come from anyone else, but it is the gift of God's presence to his people. In chapter 4, verse 6, it says, "And there'll be a tabernacle for shade in the daytime, from heat, for a place of refuge, for a shelter from the storm and rain." Despite our shortcomings, God still wants to unite himself to us. That's why he sent his son to die, and he gave his Spirit to dwell in us. I hope this lesson resonates so aptly with you the way it did with me. And I look forward to continuing with the book of Isaiah tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.